In this lesson, we're looking at IELTS Speaking Part 3 with a focus on self-learning and the role of teachers. Let's see how Finn handles 8 questions on the topic, and then we'll break down his answers to see how he develops his ideas and uses language effectively.
Why do some people prefer to learn things by themselves rather than with a teacher?
I think it mainly comes down to freedom and convenience. When you teach yourself something, you can learn at your own pace and focus on the parts that actually interest you. For example, if I were learning photography, I'd probably rather watch a few videos and experiment with my camera than sit through a structured course. There's also a sense of satisfaction that comes from figuring something out on your own. That said, I don't think self-learning suits everyone. Some people need guidance and encouragement, especially when the subject is difficult or technical.
What are the main advantages of learning something without a teacher?
The biggest advantage is probably flexibility. You can decide when, where, and how you want to learn, which is particularly useful for people who have busy schedules. Another advantage is that you can tailor the learning process to your own needs. If you already understand one part of a subject, you can skip it and spend more time on something you find difficult. I also think self-learning can make people more independent because they have to solve problems and find answers for themselves rather than immediately relying on someone else.
What are the disadvantages of self-learning?
The main problem is that you don't necessarily know whether you're learning the right thing in the right way. Without a teacher, it's easy to misunderstand a concept or develop a bad habit without realizing it. Another issue is motivation. When nobody is checking your progress, it's quite easy to procrastinate, especially if the subject becomes boring or difficult. I've experienced that myself with online courses. I might be really motivated for the first week, but then life gets busy and suddenly I haven't touched the course for a month. So, self-learning gives you freedom, but you also have to provide your own discipline.
Do you think everyone is capable of learning effectively without a teacher? Why or why not?
Not necessarily. I think most people can learn something independently, but the extent to which they can do it effectively depends on the person and the subject. Some people are naturally curious and quite disciplined, so they're comfortable researching things and figuring them out through trial and error. Others learn better when someone explains a concept to them or gives them regular feedback. And for certain subjects like medicine or advanced mathematics, having an expert to guide you is obviously extremely valuable. So I wouldn't say self-learning is impossible for anyone, but I do think some people benefit from structured guidance much more than others.
How has the internet changed the way people learn new skills?
It's completely changed it, really. In the past, if you wanted to learn a skill, you might have had to take a class, buy a book, or find someone who could teach you. Now you can learn almost anything from your phone. If I wanted to learn how to cook a particular dish, fix something around the house, or learn some basic coding, I could find a tutorial within a few minutes. The biggest change, in my opinion, is accessibility. Learning is no longer limited by where you live or whether you can afford a traditional course. The downside is that there's so much information online that it can be difficult to know which sources are actually reliable.
Do you think teachers will become less important in the future because of technology?
I think technology will probably change the role of teachers, but I don't think it will make them unimportant. Technology is very good at providing information and explaining basic concepts, but teachers do much more than that. They can notice when a student is struggling, give personalized feedback, and motivate them when they're losing confidence. They also create a social environment where students can discuss ideas and learn from each other. So I could see teachers spending less time simply delivering information and more time guiding students and helping them apply what they've learned. In that sense, technology might actually make good teachers more effective.
Should schools encourage students to learn things independently? Why?
Definitely. I think schools should teach students how to learn, rather than simply give them information to memorize. In real life, you're not always going to have someone telling you exactly what to do. So being able to research a problem, evaluate information, and find a solution is extremely useful. Schools could encourage this through independent projects, research assignments, or letting students choose some of the topics they study. At the same time, I don't think schools should just leave students to figure everything out themselves. They still need teachers to provide structure and guidance, especially when they're young.
Which is more important for success? Having a good teacher or being a motivated learner? Why?
If I had to choose, I'd say being a motivated learner is more important. A great teacher can give you excellent guidance, but if you have no interest in learning, there's only so much they can do. A motivated person can make progress even with limited resources because they'll look for solutions, ask questions, and keep going when things get difficult. Having a good teacher can certainly make the process faster and easier, though. So, ideally, you want both: a teacher who knows how to guide you and a student who is genuinely willing to put in the effort. But between the two, I'd probably bet on motivation in the long run.
So that's the end of the interview. Now let's break down each answer and look at the key ideas and language Finn uses. Question 1. Why do some people prefer to learn things by themselves rather than with a teacher? Finn starts with a clear reason. I think it mainly comes down to freedom and convenience. It comes down to is a useful expression for explaining the main reason behind something. He then explains what he means by freedom. People can learn at their own pace and focus on the areas that interest them. He also gives a hypothetical example about learning photography, which helps make his answer more concrete. And finally, he adds a balanced point. That said, I don't think self-learning suits everyone. This is a useful way to introduce a contrasting idea and make your answer more nuanced. Question 2. What are the main advantages of learning something without a teacher? Finn immediately identifies his main point. The biggest advantage is probably flexibility. Notice the word probably. It makes the statement sound more natural and conversational. He's presenting an opinion rather than stating an absolute fact. He then explains what flexibility means in this context. You can decide when, where, and how you want to learn. He also introduces the idea of tailoring the learning process to your own needs. That means adapting the learning process so that it works for you personally. Finally, he explains another advantage. Self-learning can make people more independent because they have to solve problems for themselves. Question 3. What are the disadvantages of self-learning? Finn's first point is that you don't always know whether you're learning something in the right way. Without a teacher, you may misunderstand a concept or develop a bad habit without realizing it. He then introduces another disadvantage: motivation. This time he supports the idea with a personal example. He talks about taking online courses and losing motivation after the first week. That makes the answer sound much more natural because he isn't just giving abstract ideas. And then he finishes with a nice contrast. Self-learning gives you freedom, but you also have to provide your own discipline. Question 4. Do you think everyone is capable of learning effectively without a teacher? Why or why not? The key word here is everyone. Finn doesn't give an absolute yes or no answer. Instead, he says, not necessarily. He then explains that it depends on both the person and the subject. He contrasts two types of learners. Some people are naturally curious and disciplined, while others learn better when they have someone to explain things and give them feedback. He then gives a more specific example by mentioning subjects such as medicine and advanced mathematics, where expert guidance can be particularly valuable. This is a useful technique for part 3. When a question contains an absolute idea like everyone, always, or never, consider whether a more qualified answer would be more appropriate. Question 5. How has the internet changed the way people learn new skills? Finn begins with, it's completely changed it, really. This is a very natural conversational opening. He then compares the past with the present. In the past, people might have needed a class, a book, or another person to teach them. Now, they can often find a tutorial within a few minutes. Finn gives several everyday examples, including cooking, fixing things around the house, and coding. Then he identifies the main change as accessibility. Learning's now less restricted by where you live or whether you can afford a traditional course. But he also adds a drawback. Because there is so much information online, it can be difficult to know which sources are reliable. Again, the balanced approach helps him develop the answer beyond a simple list of advantages. Question 6. Do you think teachers will become less important in the future because of technology? Finn gives a nuanced answer straight away. Technology will probably change the role of teachers, but I don't think it will make them unimportant. This is a very useful structure for questions about the future. He accepts that something may change, but then explains what he thinks will remain important. Finn points out that technology is good at providing information, but teachers can do things technology can't easily replace, such as noticing when students are struggling, giving personalised feedback, and motivating them. He then makes a prediction. Teachers may spend less time simply delivering information and more time guiding students and helping them apply what they've learned. So, rather than saying technology will simply replace teachers, he gives a more balanced prediction about how their role might change. Question 7. Should schools encourage students to learn things independently? Why? Finn gives a direct answer. Definitely. He then makes an important distinction. Schools should teach students how to learn, rather than simply giving them information to memorize. He connects this idea to real life by explaining that people won't always have someone telling them exactly what to do. He then gives some practical examples of how schools could encourage independent learning, such as independent projects and research assignments. And finally, he adds an important qualification. Students shouldn't simply be left on their own. They still need structure and guidance, particularly when they're young. This is another good example of how adding a qualification can make a Part 3 answer more developed and balanced. Question 8. Which is more important for success, having a good teacher or being a motivated learner? Why? Finn immediately makes his choice. If I had to choose, I'd say being a motivated learner is more important. This is a strong way to start because the examiner immediately knows his position. He then explains why motivation matters. A good teacher can provide guidance, but if the student isn't interested in learning, there's only so much the teacher can do. Finn develops this by explaining what motivated learners actually do. They look for solutions, ask questions, and keep going when things get difficult. But he doesn't completely dismiss the other side. He acknowledges that a good teacher can make the learning process faster and easier. Then he gives his ideal answer, having both a good teacher and a motivated learner. But because the question asks him to choose, he finishes by returning to his original position. I'd probably bet on motivation in the long run. It's a natural and conversational way to give a final judgment. And that's the end of the lesson. Remember, in Part 3, focus on clear ideas, good development, and natural language rather than memorizing answers. If you'd like more lessons like this, you can join our membership for extra lessons and speaking topics. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next lesson.